Welcome back to another Train Tuesday, or Taco Train Tuesday, if you like. I see the comments out there. You guys are making me hungry. I want to say thank you for everybody showing up today on this fine Tuesday, where we're going to talk about all of the exciting items that we're ready for pre-order for October. Believe it or not, yes, by Friday it will be October. And it seems hard to believe that this year is almost up. So let's do some shout outs like we always do. Let's see who's hanging out with us today. We've got Ricky. Saw Ricky this past weekend. We'll talk more about that. Maurice, Derek, Donald, Anthony, James, Kevin. Let's see who else did we have show up earlier. Kevin, Marvin, Chris, Jay Cure, Dan, SP Scotty, Chris, George, Gary. A lot of guys coming on board because they're excited. We're going to talk about GP38-2s today. As I said during the announcements this past Friday, GP38-2s are kind of the do-anything locomotive introduced in the early 70s. These locomotives are pretty much like the everyday pickup truck to the railroads. They are great for mainline, and they're great for switching, industrial, you name it. These guys can be seen all over in different types of service. So I want to also thank the Cornfield crowd for welcoming me in this past weekend. Went to a really cool Fremo and N-Track meet in central Illinois. Had a good time there. We'll talk a little bit about that, maybe share some pictures from the event a little bit later. But let's do one more round of shout outs before we get this show started. So we've got Darren. We've got Mr. Dan, and who else do we have? Jay Cure. We've got Marvin, Christian, Mark, Frederick, Michael. Thanks, guys, for coming on board. Like I said, we've got a great show for you today. We're talking nothing but Genesis GP38-2s. There's so many versions that we are offering this month. I wanted to dedicate a whole show to that. So we'll be talking about those, answering some questions, showing you what's going on new at Athearn and what's going on out there. But before we get the show, let's do what we always do. Let's put down the hobby knife, get into a comfortable position, and grab that beverage of choice. It's time for Train Tuesday. And with no further ado, let's talk GP38-2s. Now we're going to start with CSX. A lot of you guys out there were asking for YN3 CSX, and we figured, you know what? The time is right to do these 38-2s in CSX YN3. So let's see what we have offered for you. And we'll talk a little bit about these in detail. So the first one is 2721. Now, before I go any further, a couple of things to remember. When Conrail was broken up between CSX and Norfolk Southern, a lot of these GP38-2s ended up for both railroads. This time we're choosing to do the CSX versions, and these are depicted mid-2000s era. Each one is a little bit different, just like you'd find on the prototype. The first one I'm showing you here, 2721, it has a small EMD plow. It's got the weed cutter plow, as they call it, front ditch lights, K5 horn, and 4 exhaust stacks, something that's a little bit of a spotting feature on this locomotive. Now, coming up next, you'll see some subtle differences. Lineage is still Conrail. It is still painted up in the YN3 CSX, and it's still mid-2000s that this locomotive appeared like this. Some of the cool features about it on the prototype that our developers modeled was, again, it's going to have the weed cutter plow. It's going to have front and rear ditch lights, which will both be available to work. A K5 horn, and now this one only has 2 exhaust stacks on it, unlike the previous 2721 that had 4. So kind of some neat, subtle differences. They all came from the same place, but as time went on, things would change. Then the last one, 2759. Now this one has the 4 exhaust stacks as well, just like what we were talking about previously. This has a front and rear small EMD plow, unlike the other two. front and rear ditch lights. This one, however, has the Leslie 3-chime horn. And like I was saying, it has the 4 exhaust stacks. So really cool, especially when you think about where Conrail got their locomotives. By the time CSX got them, they were definitely had been around the block a few times. So looking through here and seeing what we've got for comments. Anybody's got any comments out there? I know the 38-2 was one that was really popular with you guys. So I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody, and I still may, so be patient with me. Okay. And if you've got questions on anything other than the GP38-2s, just wait till towards the end of the show. I will try to grab as many questions before the show ends and answer those for you. So things about pre-orders, about things that we've talked about previously, things of that nature, we'll talk about that at the end of the show. All right. So we got some comments here I'll throw up there. Nice former Conrail. Yeah. It seems hard to believe that Conrail's been gone as long as it has. And one of those railroads that I think I took for granted when I lived on the East Coast. And hard to believe they're gone. So let's talk Helm Leasing. Helm Leasing is a cool setup. And the great thing about these locomotives here, maybe you don't have a defined road yet. Maybe you don't model CSX or any of the other roads that we model, but you kind of like a GP38-2 and it's going to work well for your layout. Well, you've got Helm Leasing. Now, these locomotives can be seen throughout the country on just about any railroad, and we decided to offer these as well. And these are cool. They've got some different paths to them. Starting out with this one right here, this is 3812. 3812 is a XTM, and it was a what they call a mid to late phase body. There's very subtle differences. Now, you guys that are know the different phases will know what those differences are. It's typically within the side exhaust grills, things of that nature. So this is one that was built later in its production run, because remember, these things were built right up until about 86. This one's also going to have the all-weather windows, and it's going to have a Leslie 3-chime horn. .3814, even though it's painted in the same paint scheme, doesn't always mean it's going to be the same locomotive, even though it has the former owner. It is what they call a late phase body, and it has the Q-style radiator fans. This one has a Nathan P5 horn. It sounds a little bit different than a Leslie. Angled blower housing, and of course an all-weather window. So again, if you've got a need for power, just like in the full-scale world, these Helm Leasing units are perfect. These are what they appeared in the 1990s. So you guys that have been wanting 1990s models, here you go. These are perfect for anywhere in the 1990s, even into the early 2000s. Now the last one, even though it's in Helm painting, it is not a Helm Leasing. It's actually a Southern Pacific. Now, I was watching the comments before the show, and I hate to disappoint you. I don't have any prototype pictures of this locomotive, unfortunately. I did not see any, and I did not have enough time to go digging through some of the archives that we have access to. But this did indeed happen. It came out in the mid-1990s, so not too far from the ones that we've talked about already. And this one, again, BNSB, it's got some interesting history to it. This is a former Louisville, Nashville, and Seaboard Coastline locomotive. It has the Blomberg M trucks. It's going to have the Nathan P3 horn and a 3,200 gallon fuel tank. This is a mid-phase body, so mid to late 70s, early 80s style firecracker antenna. It still has the Helm Leasing on it, and it's got a nose headlight, which is kind of cool for this era. So again, 1990s, this would be right before UP basically took over. This would be a great locomotive to have on your SP if you're doing the 1990s, just before the merger, or maybe just after, not the merger, but the purchase of SP from the UP. Now we're also doing the Louisville and Nashville, or Louisville and Nashville, depending on how you pronounce it. That is a railroad that was actually requested quite often. And so we wanted to fulfill that. We're offering it in 2 paint schemes. Now I only have the 1 paint scheme to show you today, and it's the paint scheme from the late 70s, early 80s, before they simplified this to the Gray Ghost paint scheme. Now the one that I have pictured here, 4056, this one here, 4056, is basically as delivered. As they delivered them, it has a script style writing, the original paint scheme, kind of a catchy paint scheme, even though it's rather plain. For that era, it was actually a pretty catchy paint scheme. Now we're also doing 4057, which is, like I said, the Gray Ghost repaint, and that's more into the 80s, whereas the one that's pictured here is 1970s. And again, requested road, so we're happy to oblige and get you guys some L&N power. Yeah, it is classy. It's simple, but it's classy. I'm glad to see you guys are liking it. Yeah, Kevin's pretty happy. So yeah, good comments. And like I said, a lot of you guys had requested this, not just particularly this locomotive, but definitely this railroad. And it's one that we really haven't offered on this locomotive before. So really good to see that you guys are happy to see those. Yeah, Austin, basically all of the locomotives within the Genesis line are offered one of 2 ways. DC, which means they're out of the box, they work on DC, and they can be DCC ready, or you can buy them already equipped with the Tsunami 2 decoder, which is a phenomenal decoder and really has a lot of flexibility to it. So you can get it one of 2 ways. If you just want to run it standard DC, or you want to use another brand of decoder, you can, or you can just buy it straight from the factory, ready to go. And by the way, when you see the different types of horns and bells and things that we have on the Genesis locomotives, those are already programmed from the factory. You don't have to worry about fine-tuning them. They're all ready to go. All right. So the next railroad that we're going to talk about, and I know there's a lot of guys out there that are going to love this, Grand Trunk. And the Grand Trunk, I mean, it's another simple paint scheme, but it really looks nice, especially on the GP38-2. Here we've got 5853. 5853 is, again, a 1990s era, and all of the GT locomotives are actually going to be 1990s era. We're going to show 2 corporate paint schemes, and then we're going to show the Operation Lifesaver. Now, these are ex-Rock Island units. So at one time they were blue and white. And a lot of that equipment found itself throughout the country, and Grand Trunk was one of them. They purchased these GP38-2s and put them right to work. And I mean, basically, the thing about 5853 and 5861, which we'll talk about, former Rock Island units. They have the large corporate logo on the long hood. They're going to come from the factory with a functioning beacon. That's only on the DCC version. Will it be operational? If you got the DC version, the light will actually be there, just won't function. And all-weather windows. So again, 1990s, perfect locomotive for you. Here we are with 5861, pretty much a direct brother to the former unit that we just showed. Again, it's a really catchy paint scheme, one that you Grand Trunk guys have been really vocal about, and you wanted to see the GP38-2 again in the Grand Trunk paint scheme. So here you go. We didn't stop there though. We also offered the Operation Lifesaver. A little bit different layout as far as how it was painted, but pretty typical of that era of paint schemes when they were doing the Operation Lifesavers. Of course, you saw Norfolk Southern and other railroads do something very similar to this. Let's see how many of you guys are excited about the Grand Trunk. Let's see. Chris is like, Grand Trunk Railroad, it's an awesome paint scheme, especially the red nose. You can't go wrong with that because they are so rare to see. Yeah, that's another one. I remember seeing these quite a bit, and you don't see them anymore. Not as easily. Let's see. Looks like Frederick's really happy about this. Oh, Frederick, thank you. You spoke and we listened. That's what we do here at Athearn. The developers are always listening to your emails that you send in, and thank you for your support. All right. Brad, maybe next time on the Canadian National ones. We can only do so much. It's like a radio station. We can only play so many songs at one time, but eventually your favorite song will come on the radio. Ben loves them. He says he pre-ordered all three. Thanks, Ben. I'm glad that we filled a modeling need for you. That's always a good thing, and it's always good to see your favorite road on the list for pre-orders. All right. Let's see what else we got. All right, well, let's go to the next one. And this is one, again, was highly requested. And we didn't do it in just one paint scheme. We did it in two. And, of course, is Florida East Coast. So I'm sure you guys remember some guys called them the candy cane stripe for obvious reasons. The darker blue and that hurricane logo. This was popular in the 1990s, and it was one that we had a lot of requests for. We'd see the requests out there say, hey, do Florida East Coast and the hurricane logo scheme. So there we've got it. We've got this is more of the 1980s into the 90s. This one's got a weed cutter front plow. It's got the Oscitrol nose lights, which is, again, operational in DCC. Will not be operational in DC. The physical item will be there, but it won't function. So if you want to take advantage of that, you'll want to get the DCC with sound. And kind of cool, it's got both front and rear horns. And both the Hurricane versions that we're offering are basically identical. Because, again, these are owned by the Florida East Coast from the beginning, these two locomotives here. And you can see real quick, I'll kind of zoom in on that because it's kind of a neat thing. You don't see it on many railroads, but you've got a set of horns on the cab, and then when we come back down here, that cab's on the back as well. So that's a kind of a neat spotting feature. You can also see the exhaust stacks are not as high as they would be on some locomotives. Just subtle differences like that our developers have to spend a lot of time contacting people, getting pictures from rail fans, looking up pictures on the internet, all kinds of things like that they have to do. Now, we wanted to do the paint scheme that they offered starting in about 2015. It's a lighter blue. It's a more spelled out, more traditional Florida East Coast looking logo. And again, these are repaints of the former paint scheme. So you're going to have a lot of the same features that you had before. You've got the rear facing and the forward facing horns. Take a look at what we put on the cab. Probably because it's Florida. Those RV air conditioners. And the other thing that's kind of neat is when they rebuilt these, they removed the lights. They removed the nose lights on these. So those are completely gone. So again, rather simple paint scheme, but it's still pretty classy. David says, will they work if I put in a card? Well, if you mean by card a decoder, yes. The DC versions that we sell are DCC ready. They're a plug and play type of setup. So you can put in a decoder and make that item functional. All right. Used to take photos of the FEC back in the 80s when I was stationed in NAS Jacksonville. We'll be ordering the candy cane unit. Yeah, it's kind of a cool paint scheme. I remember these. I actually had a set of Athearn locomotives years ago, back in the blue box days, that had the candy cane scheme, and it's kind of neat. Although, you know, the new version looks equally nice. It's classy, it's basic, but it still has a nice classy look to it. So here's one that you guys have been requesting for a very long time. And I'm happy to say the guys have been busy doing the research, and this is one that probably will, I'm willing to bet, might outsell all the other ones, maybe even combined. I don't know. A lot of guys asking for MKT, and why not? It's a great railroad, or it was a great railroad, and we've even got some prototype pictures of these units to show you here in a moment. But let's talk about the two different versions that the developers have offered. Now, these are based on the simplified paint. We talked a little bit about this on Friday. Originally, those stripes, those barricade stripes, went all the way to the roof. And you can imagine how much fun that would be in the paint shop when it came time to repaint these. If you've ever had to custom paint one of these, you probably, well, let's just say you probably used some colorful language while you were doing it, because these are just one of the more unique paint schemes that you could see out there. The yellow and green barricade stripes are just pretty overwhelming on the front of that locomotive. So if you're a custom painter, rejoice that you don't have to custom paint these anymore. First one we have up here is 313. Now 313 is a non-dynamic. It is the yellow safety frame stripes. MU catches on both the front and rear pilots, and the road number is on the side of the long hood, right above the logo. A little bit different than the next one that we're going to talk about. So even within the Missouri, Kansas, Texas locomotives, there were subtle differences. So here's 318. Right away, you can see the differences. Dynamic brake. Obviously, with the dynamic brake there, you could not put the road number where it was before, so they simply put it on the side of the cab, which made a simple change make a subtle difference to the paint scheme. You can see that it's missing its barricade stripes on that section of the cab. This one also did not have frame stripes. MU catches are on the rear pilot. And like I was saying, the road number is on the side of the cab, not on the long hood, thanks to the dynamic brakes. And then last but not least, 320, same thing. It's going to have the dynamic brakes, simplified paint scheme like the other three, with it being lettered on the cab. Some subtle differences on this guy. Is it does have yellow safety frame stripes, as you can see there, and just kind of a neat paint scheme. So for you guys that have been asking for these, and I know you have, there you go. I'm glad to see that. Let's see how many guys out there. So we've got David. He says, awesome MKT units. Hopefully they match the green with the most recent release. These all came from E&D in green, and as you said, representing the second painting, no roof stripes. Yeah, I mean, it's really cool. We've offered these before, but in the first paint scheme, and these are the ones that 1980s. So this is a little bit later in their career. So I'm glad you like that. Still would like to see a Prime for Grime MKT patch former Conrail. Yeah, that would be kind of cool. Bradley says, I painted up MKT 605. You have the patience of a saint. Yeah. Yep, Rob, you're right. It's a cool paint scheme. It's just really cool. Joel's liking that. Alan's liking that. Yeah, and it's another railroad that I have no business to even model, but I would probably get one of these just because they look so cool. Mike, thank you for your comments. Yeah, I mean, they're going to be great, and you don't have to worry about, custom painting one anymore. The details are there. They're based on the specific prototypes, and of course, all of that arduous painting is done for you. It's literally take it out of the box and maybe do some weathering on it, and you're good to go. Yeah, I'm seeing some other comments on here, and that's good. I'm glad to see you guys are happy. Again, a lot of requests for this locomotive, a lot of requests for this paint scheme, and trust me, the guys have been doing their research on these, and I think you're going to want to get your orders together for these because these locomotives are phenomenal. It's a great round for this release. Now, before I go on to some news, I wanted to show you too some prototype pictures. So you got to have prototype pictures. I mean, and I was fortunate enough to get some MKT pictures from Tony Cook over at Model Railroad News. These are from the Kevin Daly collection, and Kevin Daly, of course, has a huge collection. A lot of these are used in their magazines over at White River. So I want to thank Tony and the guys at White River for allowing us to use these pictures. Let's go through these real quick and see what we've got here. Here's number 310. It's a southbound Kansas City. This is back in March 20th of 1987. So you can see there, it's got some grime on the top of it, but you can definitely tell those cabs, the tops are no longer painted like they were the first time. Here's 310 again. This is also in Kansas City. Same date, March 20th, 1987. You can see the grime has already gotten onto these guys pretty good. So some weathering for your locomotives, depending on what area you're modeling, you're going to want to put a little bit of weathering into them. Check out the Conrail unit back there too. Here's 312, and really clean picture. This is in April of 1987. This is just outside of Kansas City. And going around that super elevated curve, looks like it's got a auto rack in tow. But relatively clean there, just a light dusting of grime on the lower portions of the locomotive. The rest of the locomotive looks remarkably clean for 1987. Here's a cool shot. One taking the hole, waiting for the main to clear. You got two for the price of one. GP38-2 sitting here. The one that's parked, 321, is a southbound Texas special, and it's meeting the 603 Kansas City in April of 1987. And again, they're relatively clean locomotives here, which is surprising. 321 again, really cool angle. This was taken just outside of Kansas City, also in April of 1987, and looking really good. Definitely a locomotive you wouldn't miss with that paint scheme. So, like I said, wanted to talk to you guys about some news. We had a great weekend this past weekend. I went out to Mclean, Illinois, and the Mclean Depot put on a Fremo setup. We had guys from all over the country show up with their HO scale Fremo. We even had some N-track as well, and figured I'd take a little bit to show you some of the pictures that we grabbed out there. Athearn had a small display with a few locomotives. I had a switching layout that I would operate and talk to some of you guys that made the show. It was a really great show. It was really well attended. We had folks as far away as Oklahoma show up for this event, and it keeps growing. It keeps growing every year. Great little, well, I shouldn't say little. It took up a whole elementary school gymnasium, and then the stage area was filled by the N-track layouts. So let's go ahead and show some pictures here. Now, this is Ricky Keel. He has contributed to us before, and this is his scratch-built grain elevators. Very impressive, and it really does capture the scope and size of these skyscrapers of the prairie. Just a really cool corner module that he's put together with these grain elevators here. And you know, even for a guy like me that's from New England, I don't know why I'm fascinated with grain elevators. They're just a cool thing to model. I didn't get the name of the gentleman that had this module, but it was a really cool module. If you look carefully, you'll see the Iowa Interstate pickup truck there working on a relay cabinet. This gentleman had actually modeled an actual, well, if you look here, you know, if you can see my arrow, he's got these little IR sensors, and it was a detector. And he had a speaker, a Bluetooth speaker underneath the layout. So every time a train went by, it would announce the milepost, and it would say how many axles, and it'd say no defects, just like when you're rail fanning. And it was really cool. In fact, the first time I heard it, we're not too far set up from the Union Pacific Main from Chicago to St. Louis. I thought somebody had their scanner on. It was a really cool technique, and a really, as you can see, really nicely scenic module. Now, this is an overall view of the gymnasium, kind of give you an idea of the size of the Fremo complete setup. It's kind of a middle section, kind of show you what you got going on there. I believe they had 2, maybe 3 diamonds or junctions, which kept dispatch busy. And all weekend, from setup at Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday till teardown, guys were operating this layout. It was really cool to see these full trains leave the yard and go to their destinations, picking up, dropping off as it goes. So if you're into operations, look into Fremo HO, and there's also Fremo N for you guys that are into the N scale. Here's a very cool module made up of mainly Athearn reefers. This gentleman built a really nice cold storage warehouse. It's all scratch built. You notice carefully here, I'll zoom in a little bit. The details this gentleman put into this module are just amazing. If you look carefully, you can actually see the loading dock lights, and they would change. They'd be green or red depending on what was there. He also put the LED lighting on the actual generators themselves. Superb modeling. And that's the great thing about Fremo. You get some great ideas. You get to see some people that are just talented modelers. They've got a good eye for this. The other thing, too, before I move on, too, if you look at the reefer sitting there, that would actually go inside the building. The gentleman had designed it so that the door would actually operate. So it would open and close. You could open that up. The reefer could go inside, and once it was completely disconnected from its train, the door could close again. It was really cool. Nice low-level shot of a couple of the modules. Another impressive picture of Ricky's grain elevators. And these are, like I said, these are completely scratch built. And these are based on an actual location. Now, I'm sorry, Ricky, if you're out there, I forgot the name. I believe it's in Nebraska, but just incredible craftsmanship in this module. Here we have a recently released GP18, Genesis GP18, hanging out in front of Ricky's grain elevator. If this doesn't scream Illinois, I don't know what does. It reminds me of Edelstein, Illinois. You've got some great scenes here. You've got your John Deere harvester. You've got the overpass in the background, and you've got working signals. And yes, the signals were functional. They were part of the whole setup. Other side of that module, got ourselves some more working signals. You can see where they've closed the road there back in the past. Looks like the local gun club is practicing. Got a nice little shooting range there. And this little module had a covered bridge. I guess it made me homesick. I had to take a picture of the covered bridge. Looks like Vermont or New Hampshire. Now, not to be undone, the N-scale guys were there too. They had an N-track setup. Here we've got a couple of N-scale SD70s. These are Athearns. And these were pulling auto racks. By the time I got up there on the stage to get pictures of them, the N-track guys had left for the day, but they were having great operations themselves, and they were running trains all day. Here's an overall look of the N-track layout. Small layout, but they still had a lot of fun. There was about 5 guys in all. Here's a close-up of one of the modules, Steve Zink's N-track module that he's had for at least 20 years that I know of. You can probably tell what one of his favorite roads are, as you can see it in the background. Everything on Steve's module is custom paint or custom built. Nothing is factory. And got ourselves an N-scale ICG and a GM&O back there. The other side of Steve's module. And then going back to the Fremo guys, I caught this just as I was leaving. A really cool custom paint by Bill Pearsall. And really believable. That's his own railroad. He was pulling a business train towards the end of the day when the traffic had slowed down a little bit. So really cool. It was really great to see everybody out there. I had a good time, ran a lot of trains, and I got to talk to a lot of folks and showed them the new Dash 9s, which we should be seeing those before November. So if you pre-ordered the Dash 9s, they will be here before you know it. We talked about the new GP38-2s, which are now in hobby shops, or if you pre-ordered, you probably have one. Speaking of those GP38-2s, Michael was kind enough to send in a picture of his recently, nicely weathered, I might add, Illinois Central Gulf GP38-2. Really nice weathering on this. Not overly done, but at the same time, very believable. And for Illinois Central Gulf and that paint scheme, relatively clean as well. But Michael, we want to thank you for sending in that picture. And you'll see that later, probably tonight on Facebook. And then last but not least, last week we were talking about different things, and John had mentioned something about a certain tail number, and I wasn't quite sure what he was talking about. What he was talking about was this. This is the flat car load for his Canadian National. His little Beach Bonanza sitting there. And that's the tail number that he was talking about. This isn't John's layout. He models the Boston and Maine. And I've actually had the opportunity to operate on this layout. Here you can see 314, the GP40-2, and it's as delivered paint with that specific Athearn car. So he wanted to give me some context of what he was talking about last week. So really cool picture. Also, too, if you're in the New England area, there's the Tour de Chooch coming right up, and I believe John's layout is scheduled to be one of the layouts to operate on. So if you are in the New England area and you're interested about operations, check out Tour de Chooch, and you'll see the complete schedule there. So it sounds like things are opening up. And let's see, it looks like we had a little bit of difficulty with that last picture. Let's try something again. Not sure when that went out on you guys, but it might have been Microsoft saying it's time for an update. Let's try that again. Okay, so coming right up. All right, so let's try this one more time. All right, hopefully you guys can see this, and hopefully Microsoft doesn't do any more updates. All right, so there it is. There's the airplane that John was talking about last week, and it's pretty cool. It's kind of neat to see that. All right, so now that we've got that out there, and we'll share John's picture on Facebook as well. So, all right, I have got time for maybe one or two questions. We ran a little bit later today because we talked about the phenomenal GP38-2s. Let's see what you guys have got on your minds out there. Joel, he's saying need more ICG units, orange and white. I couldn't agree with you more. I would love to see that. You know what I'm going to tell you? Same thing I tell you every time. And while I'm thinking of it too, let me share something else with you while I'm thinking about sending you to the Contact Us page. Let's go to the Athearn website real quick. And we're going to go to the Contact Us page. Now, something that I need to stress to you guys, really important, go to the Contact Us page. If you've got a repair, if you've got a warranty situation, if you've got a locomotive that has something that needs to be replaced or repaired and nobody else can help, maybe you can go to athearn.com and select Contact Us. And if you go to Contact Us, you'll see that we are located right in the middle of the heart of the heartland, Champaign, Illinois. So don't send your repair items to Long Beach anymore because that facility's been closed now for a little over 6 months. You might not see your locomotive again, so you don't want to do that. Send that to 2904 Research Road, Champaign, Illinois. Attention service. And again, try to make any information that you give our employees, try to make it as complete as possible. Just make it easier for everybody involved. Take out all the ambiguity in that. But likewise, if you want to see more ICG orange and white, like myself and Joel, go to the Contact Us page and put that in product suggestions. That's how we saw a lot of the GP38-2s in the paint schemes and roads that we have today. All right, let's see. Let's see what kind of questions we have. All right, well, this is a good question. Is Athearn planning to release a UP painted version of the Roundhouse GP60? I'd like to get one to go with my Genesis GP15-1 I just got. Thank you. Good question, and thank you for picking up that GP15-1. I hope you're as happy with it as I am with mine. We just ran the GP60s, and they came out. We had them open for pre-order last year about this time, and they just came into stock. We did Norfolk Southern, BNSF, things of that nature. We did not do UP. But in the future, we might offer UP. Right now, we don't have any immediate plans to have those open again for pre-order, but we still got a whole year of 2022 ahead of us, so that could change. Let's see what else we've got. Here's a question. Owen wants to know, or not Owen, it's Chris. Are there any more paint schemes on the GP38-2 in the future? Oh, yeah, there's a lot. We can choose from a lot. Yeah. It's safe to say we'll offer that again in more paint schemes. Let's see. Oh, and when will the SD59MX be available for pre-order? Before the end of the year. They will be here before the end of the year. So if you're trying to, work on your budget and you'd like to know when, it will be before 2022. So there's only 3 months left. So it's going to be in one of those 3 months, but it will be soon. All right. Got some suggestions. I don't see any questions, though. I'm going to go back a little bit, see if I missed anything. Because usually when I'm going through the different screens, sometimes I'll miss stuff. Lots of suggestions. Remember where I tell you to do with those suggestions. Send them to our product suggestion email because we do read those. Any more updates on the AC 4400s? No, not since we did our video about 2 weeks ago. John came on board and we had about an hour-long show. If you haven't seen it, go to our YouTube channel, and don't forget, go ahead and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. That way, if you miss a live presentation, you can always go back and be notified that we've got a new video up. If that video is up, John talks a little bit about it. That one too, it's not really too far out. It's going to be here within the next 6 months. So stay tuned for that. They're busy working on that. Daniel says, any chance of a low-nose GP18 soon? Boston and Maine and Mopac. Well, those are both great roads to choose. There's so much that the developers are working on that I don't even know everything that they're working on. Usually when we do a show where John or Janet comes on and lets me know what's going on, those are the things that they've told me about. So it's kind of like Area 51 out there. Imagine the things they haven't told us. All right. No, I hate those. If you're talking about those foamy candy things, no, we won't be doing those. Unless that is a rail fan designation for something that I don't know about. I doubt we'll be doing those. All right, looks like we've got everything else here. Oh, wait a minute, there's one question. Okay, so we've got a question on the SD40-2s. Any idea when the SD40-2s are expected? PDF said August. I had ordered one of the Athearn 75th. Yeah, good question. So as you know, there are some developing news as far as shipping delays, and there are many reasons as to why. So it is delayed a little bit. We're hoping to see those sometime by the end of October, middle to the end of October. So if you pre-ordered an SD40-2, we're hoping it's down to weeks, not months. Now, of course, that can change because with everything that's going on in shipping right now, things tend to be a little unusual than the normal process. So the only thing we can do is kind of wait. We have to wait just like you do. So we will keep you posted, and also keep posted on Train Tuesday, of course, and social media, where we try to post updates of all those things that you've pre-ordered. All right. Well, with that, I think we've had a pretty good show. We had some good questions. We looked at some great stuff. Now, remember, you've got till the end of the month. I believe that's going to be all the way to the 29th of October to pre-order a GP38-2. But don't wait. Go ahead, go to your dealer, pre-order any one of the ones that we've talked about. And until next time, I hope everybody stays as happy, stays healthy, and above all, high greens, everybody. Take care.